In this video, I'm going to be talking about the history of thriller films and the timeline of thriller films from the 1930s to the 1960s, and then from the 1960s going up in decades till the present year, 2016. So I'm going to be discussing how thriller films have changed over the years, and comparing maybe the storylines and of the films, and just see how the filmmaking procedure generally changes over the years. More of the trailers than the actual films, because I'm producing a thriller film trailer, and discuss whether or not it's better for better or worse. And basically, I'm just going to be talking about what the trailer is about, and what it does that maybe is different from the previous decade, or something that was new that was introduced, or maybe something that wasn't so good that they brought in, or maybe something that wasn't so good they brought back, something that's good. Just going to be talking about the trailers in general. So I've chosen some personal opinions of some of the best films that I think from these decades. Not the best films overall, just from these decades, which ones I enjoyed. And I've tried to choose ones that will have slightly different storylines to compare, which will allow me to get a better look at the differences between each decade and what aspects are good and bad from each, which will help my research into the thriller film genre, and give me ideas and aspects I would like to take in for my thriller film. So I'm going to be comparing films that I feel that are different from each other, but maybe some films that are actually more similar to each other than others, just to see if they change in the way they present their film. But that will all make sense later on in the video. So I'll be focusing more on trailers rather than the whole film, as the trailer is what I'm producing. But I will talk about the actual film if I feel there is a need to, or something that happened in that film that kind of changed that decade or the way we see films. So that's the way I'm looking at it. So the first year I'm going to be talking about is the 1930s, and I'm going to be talking about the King Kong trailer. So the reason, just quickly, I chose to do 1930s, even though from here out I do from the 60s up to the present day, is that I feel that King Kong was a really big step in the way of filmmaking. And I feel that it at least needed its own little section to kind of show where we've come from. And I wanted to do kind of early filmmaking, but King Kong was such a big influence to many filmmakers from this point that I feel like I needed to talk about it. So King Kong was released in 1933 and is one of the most inspirational and revolutionary films of all time for the day and age that it was released in. The story follows a film crew who travel to a tropical island for an exotic location to shoot a film, and they discover a colossal giant gorilla that takes a shine to their female blonde star. He is then captured and brought back to New York City for public exhibition. King Kong has made such a legacy for itself and has spawned multiple remakes and sequels, and even remakes of sequels, which are all good in their own. They're all good in their own way too. Some of the remakes that the more significant remakes is the 1976 King Kong and the 2005 King Kong, which were both fairly good films. They're quite different from each other, but they all follow the same basic story. Getting ready for King Kong Skull Island in 2017, which I've already done a video about. So this is not to mention all the unlicensed and kind of rip-off films who tried to earn money from Kong's success. And also some of these kind of include Mighty Joe Young from Disney. Yes, that's still a good film, but we all know what it's based off. And just countless others. And obviously it's got its sequel coming out in 2017. So even though I mentioned this, I just want to point it out again because Kong's success still continues, even nearly 80 years down the line, maybe more than 80 years from the original film. And that just shows you how much of an impact Kong has made. The fact that it's still bringing out remakes and sequels and just new imaginings of this story from 1933 when this film was actually released. It shows how far and how revolutionary Kong was, the fact that people still talk about and still want to try and make a new adaptation of this film today. So the original trailer for King Kong has a lot of text over the screen, I noticed, telling you about the film and what to expect, creating anticipation of the visual effects on the film. So as I said, this was a film that was very revolutionary for its time. So the fact that it's talking about what it's going to see, and I remember one of the quotes was, like it's coming out of the screen. So it's hyping itself up on the realism which films today now have, which they didn't have back in the day. So this is an editing method not normally seen in the modern day. Well, at least not over the video. They do cut to black and show a bit, but they don't usually have it over the video like this does. But back when this film was released, it was always occurring. And I've said this was because it was coming out of the silent movie era. So obviously, yes, this wasn't the first film that showed speech in, but it's coming out of that era where there is sound now and they do have a voice. So they're kind of in between that stages. The voiceover coming out of the silent movie era, the voiceover emphasizes the fact that the film is amazing, has amazing special effects, and how realistic the movie looks. The voiceover points out the fact that the film has amazing special effects and how realistic the movie looks, trying to convince the audience that it is real. This is also different, as most trailers in the modern day don't acknowledge that they are a film and the trailer acts as if the audience is they're a fly on the wall to the film, and the film takes itself as real. And they also kind of have the characters explaining what's going on in the film rather than a voiceover giving them everything like King Kong did back in the 1930s. And the fact that this film is in black and white continues its vintage look and vibe, showing the movie's old age, and it has not dated well. It really hasn't. Unlike other thriller movies, because of like how they used to do everything, and now we have CGI, it really hasn't dated well from what they were trying to create. Not to say this is a bad film, it just hasn't dated well as it could have. So overall, the trailer for King Kong shows itself as a very self-aware trailer, and back when it was released, it did get the audience excited to see this film because it was something they'd never seen before, and at the time, the special effects were revolutionary. I don't talk about it later, but Jurassic Park in the 1990s with the CGI was another huge step, and that was maybe 60 years from this film. So there's a 60-year gap of CGI being kind of monotone, but the practical effects in this film are really, really good for its time. But as I said, however, in this day and age, the trailer can be seen as laughable, as a joke. So no, it hasn't held up as well, but yes, overall, King Kong was revolutionary and really did shape the thriller film franchise. So next, I'm going to be talking about 1960s Psycho. So moving on to the 1960s, Psycho is not only one of the most famous movies from the 1960s by Alfred Hitchcock, but one of the most famous and iconic movies of all time. So how could I not talk about this film? So the storyline follows a Phoenix secretary, and she embezzles $40,000 from her employee's client. She goes on the run and checks into a remote hotel by a young man under the domination of his mother. So that's all the synopsis I will give you about the story, because you've probably already seen it. But nearly 30 years on from Kong, Psycho was another huge step for the thriller film genre. And the reason I jumped from the 30s to the 60s is because I think in between, to me, didn't feel like I needed to talk about it. I felt like I wanted to talk about Kong, but the 1960s is where I wanted to start, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. Not only did it take more of a suspenseful crime take on the thriller film genre, but also shocked audiences by killing off its main star in less than 30 minutes of the film. This was something that the audiences had never seen before, and made the film like all the more shocking, really, because people just wasn't expecting it. And though you didn't see this in the trailer, I do feel I needed to point that out. And it did make it more scary and suspenseful by them doing this. Another technique used in the trailer for this film is the fact that Alfred Hitchcock, the director, is talking about the setting and location of the film in the trailer. And the trailer that I analysed didn't have him. He was in it talking about the setting very shortly, but there was another trailer released where he actually took the audience around the location. The whole trailer was based around him telling the story around the location. The one I had more movie clips, but yes, he was still in it, and I found that very surprising because you don't see that at all nowadays. So I do feel like that was something that Yes, I'm not going to use myself because I don't really see the point in it. I don't really feel like it's what I'm trying to go for. But back in the, you can see the step they're taking from different. Yes, I don't feel it. I feel it was for worse, but I still brave the fact that this was a bold step to make, and I think for the time and age of the films, it was a good thing to do. So obviously, this is not something often seen as trailers today. However, it is not unusual for Hitchcock to present his films in the trailer to the audience. So in another trailer for Psycho, Hitchcock takes the audience around the tour or the location of the film and gives some insight to the story. This is different from the trailers today, as the film gives an insight to the story rather than having its director take them around. Okay, and obviously this is different from trailers of today, because trailers of today pretend to be a real thing, and they do not like to acknowledge themselves as a trailer or as a film, especially in the thriller film genre. They like to take themselves very seriously and as if it's really happening, which in some ways I think is better because you want to get involved in a world that you know is fake but you like to believe is real. Much like Star Wars universe or something like that. Whereas if you see the director talking about it in the trailer, I feel it takes away from that. Other people may think differently, but this is what I personally think about it. Something I was surprised to see in the trailer is that they show the most famous scene, and the scene that the whole film is about, the whole film that it leads up to, the climax, they show it right at the beginning of the trailer. So I kind of saw this in two ways. The first way is that it's a really good idea, as audiences would be scared by this and see what the film is about and what to expect. So yeah, they get excited for the film and they want to go and see it, and I suppose I do too. However, my second view is that it can spoil the film, meaning that people won't want to see the full film because they've seen that on the screen. And it's not as thrilling as scary because they've seen it, and therefore they don't go and see the film. And that's what I thought. Yes, I saw the film before I saw the trailer. But seeing the trailer, I was kind of like, was there any... Yes, there is points to the film. Obviously there is. But it kind of just took away, like... I can imagine if you watched the trailer first, you saw that, and then you saw the rest of the film, you think, oh, I saw the best bit. And that's just going to disappoint audiences, and that's what I don't want to happen. So I don't think I'll use this in my trailer. Overall, the trailer for Psycho is very unique, incorporating the director to give an overview of the film. This trailer has dated well, nearly 60 years on, and provides a suspenseful look at the film, meaning that audiences of the 1960s were excited to see a fresh new thriller film that was like something they'd never seen before. So next we're going to be talking about the 1970s film Jaws. Jaws was released in 1975 and was so realistic that it actually made people scared to go in the sea. The animatronics were so revolutionary, and it took the thriller film onto a whole new, like, horror suspenseful scale. Yes, it's still a thriller film. It's not really a psychological thriller film. It's visually scaring, but it is kind of psychological because it does mess with your head and you do get scared to go in the water. Even though sharks don't come that close, or even in the UK, yes, it's not set in the UK, but it still made UK audiences scared to go in the water. And that really does prove how much of a successful thriller film Jaws really was. So, and yes, I do count it as a thriller film, not a horror film. Some people, yes, count it as a horror film, but I don't really feel like it's at that scale of scariness to be a horror film. But I do feel like it's at that scale of suspense to cement itself as a good thriller film. So some view it as a monster film, a bit like King Kong. What made this so scary compared to King Kong is that sharks are a real living thing today, and obviously people do die by sharks, and people see sharks all the time. And it's not a gigantic gorilla like we saw in King Kong, so it's much more easy to believe and be scared of. The storyline is when a gigantic great white shark begins to menace the small island community of Amity. A police sheriff, a marine scientist, and a grizzled fisherman set out to stop it. So that's the base of the storyline. Jaws tries to scare its audience into seeing the film using a non-diegetic narrator voiceover with a deep, frightening voice, warning people about the dangers of sharks. This, along with the quick camera work, also makes creates this kind of motion sickness illusion. making an uncomfortable experience for the audience, and kind of all the shaky stuff, it really fits in with the kind of atmosphere of being at sea and on a boat. And it kind of lets the audience be a part of this, which creates an unnerving atmosphere for them to enjoy, which I feel like if you create this kind of unnerving atmosphere for a thriller film, it really does help bring the film out to a whole new level of showing off what you can do and showing off how they can still scare audiences. And because they're kind of like, yes, I'm a bit frightened, but I want to go and see what happens in this film. I feel like that all the time. It's freaky, maybe not so much with Jaws, but you feel like, but I want to know what happens. So you go and see the film. And I do think this is a great way of getting your audience to come and see the film. This is a great way to attract audiences to the film if you are going down the lines of making a more horror-focused thriller film rather than action. This definitely did its job as a trailer and suited what the film was about, and showed some scary, intense scenes without spoiling any of the major plot points or showing too much of the shark itself, which in turn creates a more suspenseful atmosphere in the trailer, making people want to go and see the final film. And this is unlike Psycho, when it showed its most famous scene and what it all builds up to. Jaws tried to keep that under the radar, showing more other scenes, whereas Psycho would have struggled to do this, but at the same time, still are both great trailers. The film also shocks audiences by showing some new camera shots underwater, creating a feel to the film being set it's being set in the sea, getting the audience excited for something they have never seen before, showing the audience something new. So having this kind of underwater camera shot made you feel like you're seeing what the shark's seeing, and also kind of created this kind of intense atmosphere because you know the sharks, you know this film's about a shark, and you know what's out there, and kind of seeing this shot that probably had never been seen before, it does create this kind of intense atmosphere because you're seeing something that you don't usually see underwater. And with it being set in the sea as well, I do feel like this was a great thing to do for the film. So overall, the trailer for Jaws creates this intense atmosphere surrounding the antagonist of the film being the shark, and not really showing him to the audience, creating a suspenseful atmosphere. And with the deep voiceover, it truly excites audience to go and see the film. And I just want to point out quickly that it doesn't show its antagonist. And yes, the antagonist is like an animal and a shark. It's another film that, I was inspired by to maybe make my antagonist not be seen, because it does create suspense. And Jaws trailer is a great example of how to build suspense in your thriller film trailer, which is what I'm creating. So I feel this is a great one to look at. So now we move on to the 1980s, and the film I'm going to be talking about in the 1980s is Rambo: First Blood. So First Blood starred Sylvester Stallone in what you could say was his highlight year in 1980, the 70s and 80s. And he took the thriller film genre to be more action-based, action thriller this became at this point. And it also was an action-adventure genre, really. It kind of just took this thriller film genre in a different perspective. Yes, it's still a thriller film, but it just kind of made it more action-based with a bit of adventure, but it still kept that intense thriller film vibe, as well as the suspense in some scenes as well. So both feel, and it's the reason I brought up the fact that it differs from Jaws. It differs a lot from Jaws, the decade before it. So, but both films kept that brutality. So both were still quite violent, and they still had this suspense intensity. It's just that they both took. Jaws focused more on that suspense, and Rambo focused more on the action. So you can see where they differed. The storylines follows a former Green Beret, John Rambo, as he is pursued into the mountains surrounding a small town by a Triangle sheriff and his deputies, forcing Rambo to survive using his combat skills. So this is the basis of the storyline. Hopefully I pronounced all of that right. So the trailer shows the plot unfolding and shows how John Rambo got into this mess. Which it shows the mess which he is in, and showing us what the film is all about. So it focuses more on this kind of unfolding the plot for us, telling us what to expect and what we're going to see in the film, rather than focusing on showing the best bits of the film as such. So this is slightly different to past trailers, as showing because it shows what the film is all about. So this is slightly different from past trailers, as other trailers from 1960s and 70s show the more intense bits of the film to get people excited for the motion picture, like Psycho showing its most famous scene within a couple of seconds of the clip, of the trailer, sorry, and Jaws showing all those intense scenes on the boat towards the end. And yes, Rambo does show intense scenes as such, but it kind of shows the slightly slower, I say boring, but slightly slower scenes, which could be seen as kind of a downfall because people are going to think, oh, but it also seems it's boring, but people could be seen as a good thing because people know what to expect from the story aspect of the film. Whereas this trailer is I've put it as similar to 1933's King Kong trailer, as that also show what the film is about and mostly follows the clips in chronological order, meaning it is how the clips are from the film in order. So Rambo does this like King Kong, whereas you see the beginning of the film and it progresses towards the end of the film. And that's just all up to interpretation. Personally, I don't think I'm going to use this. I want to go for a more Psycho Jaws effect, but it works well for these films. It introduces you to all the major characters, which most trailers do. However, what it does, what other trailers do not, is show a lot of the antagonist. About the same amount as the protagonist, actually, which is more than I think is normal. And it just shows a lot of the officers and deputies as well as John Rambo. It shows a more action side to the thriller film genre, showing lots of explosions and fight scenes, which is much different from Jaws and Psycho the previous decades, as they go for a more suspenseful feel to the trailers. The trailer tries to show the audience things that will excite them and excite the viewer, as well as introducing them to the story and characters of the film, so they know what to expect when they see the full feature film. Showing its protagonist in a kind of cool action type way, but also showing that he is a human downside, he is got a heart and feels pain, allows the audience to kind of connect with the character and grow to like him before they've even seen the film, which First Blood did very well. What this film did new is portray how far movies have come in terms of special effects at the time, which now can amaze the audience and show them what to expect in the coming years, such as explosions and so on and so forth, and makeup and stuff. And yes, you could say it's for each decade, but Rambo just seemed to jump, even though there's a jump from Jaws to Psycho because of the black and white, but this just seemed more of a jump in the fact that there's lots of explosions and lots of action happening at one time. Overall, First Blood is a good trailer which has developed since the previous decades to show more special effects and show more about what the story is about and the cool action thriller scenes that come in with it, which all excite the audience and make them want to come and see the full-length feature film of Rambo First Blood. So next is the 1990s, and the film I've chosen for the 1990s is Silence of the Lambs. So Silence of the Lambs took a more detective look at the thriller film genre and added a crime drama type thing in Silence of the Lambs. Looking at the antagonist helping a protagonist was something that people hadn't seen much before this film. It follows a young FBI candidate who must confide in an incarcerated and manipulative killer to receive his help on catching another serial killer who actually skins his victim. So already we can tell from the trailer that this is a dangerous kind of film, and you can already see the age rating increasing, which from Jaws, both films were 12, 15 to Rambo First Blood and 18 to Silence of the Lambs. So the ages is complete. And of course this varies on which film you picked, but I tried to pick the most impactful thriller films of that decade. And if you don't agree, it's kind of my personal opinion, but you can see that the age rating is increasing. So it takes the genre back to kind of the crime detective type storylines, which Psycho kind of did in the 1960s, but it wasn't so much about... it wasn't completely the same, but it tones down the action from First Blood. Silence of the Lambs also tries a horror film aspect, much like Psycho and Jaws did, trying to go for a psychological type thriller, and trying to get people inside of people's heads, of the audience's heads, and which is very good to do in the trailer because they're going to be asking themselves questions about the trailer, and then the more questions they ask, the more they want to find out the answer to these questions, and then the more likely they are to come and see your film. It was aimed at an older audience and focused more on its storyline and making the audience interested in that storyline and trying to get them involved and trying to figure out what is actually happening and who is the murderer, so on and so forth. Just asking them all these questions, which I was just describing, and it's just getting them more. It makes the audience feel that they're more involved in the film, especially me watching the trailer. Every time there was kind of like, even though I've seen the film, you kind of just keep asking yourself these questions about, is this guy telling the truth? Is Hannibal Lecter telling the truth? Is Clarice good enough to take this case? Because this is a major case that she's taking on for a young FBI agent. And especially for the type, they bring out Hannibal Lecter as this evil monster. Clarice Starling has to kind of take a steady approach, and you wonder if she can do it. It brought something new to the table for thriller films by incorporating more editing, making it fast-paced, and adding in some illusions to try and scare the audience and to show them that the film is not for the easily frightened by having Hannibal Lecter's face pop up a couple of times. And this kind of distorted type of editing really made you feel uncomfortable, and this was straight at the beginning of the trailer. So it really did make you feel uncomfortable, and this is something that I like. The fact that making the audience feel uncomfortable really kept me engaged in this trailer, and I don't think they could have done it better. Using quick cuts to introduce the antagonist straight away was very unique and created an uneasy atmosphere at the start of this trailer, making the trailer intense. Much like Jaws, the trailer uses a very deep, dark, non-diegetic voiceover, which again made the trailer more intense. This shows the aspect of older decades of films and still used in an effective way, and still affected the way that the audience looked at this film. And it affects the audience, the intense voiceover affects the audience much like it did back in 20 years ago in the 1970s in Jaws. And it still keeps this dark voiceover seems to maintain this high status of cementing a thriller film trailer. I think this is a very effective method of getting your audience excited for your thriller film. As two of the most successful films in the world, meaning this and Silence of the Lambs and Jaws, used it, so this has given me massive inspiration. I feel that the voiceover has been used it's been used in all the trailers I've talked about. It has been used at least once. Yes, in Psycho it's by Alfred Hitchcock, the director, but voiceovers are always used through these decades that I've been talking about. Now, this has got to show that voiceovers really do create this intense atmosphere, and I feel that I will benefit from using one to kind of maintain from these past genres, but looking into more modern thriller films, this might change. So overall, Silence of the Lambs created a new generation for thriller film editing, which is used to make the film trailer more intense for the audience, which hopefully would interest them more and make them come and see the full film. So basically, what Silence of the Lambs tries to do, and which a lot of thriller films are trying to do, is making it intense, changing stuff up to try and scare audience and ask them these questions in order to hopefully get them to come and see the final film. So moving on to more modern day thriller films, I'm now in the 2000s, and I'm going to be talking about probably the most famous thriller film of the 2000s, in my opinion, which is Taken, which is by far no means the best thriller film ever made, or even the best film ever made. But I feel that it's so famous and so kind of generic for people to talk about that I had to incorporate it in this timeline, because it is a massive statement in the thriller film genre. So now we take it back to action, as Taken focuses on its intense action in its fighting and chase scenes, bringing the genre to a whole new level of intense action with a hint of drama in there, because you see a man's life falling apart, so you can't help because he loses his daughter, and he will do whatever it takes to find her. So you do get this hint of drama in there, like some other films have done in the past as well. So the story follows a retired CIA agent who travels across Europe and relies on his old skills to save his estranged daughter, who has been kidnapped while on a trip to Paris. So Taken takes things into the modern era, focusing on a lot of cell phones and digital technology. It is also much like First Blood, because it's more of an action-based film, thriller film, showing lots of explosions, intense fight scenes, and car chases to keep the audiences interested and intrigued in the trailer. Taken also explores a new editing techniques, such as multiple shots on screen at once, which is different from what we had seen before this film, and I actually felt was a good way of kind of showing something different to the audience, giving them something new, and it really did kind of stand out to me from all the trailers I watched. I watched these in the order that I'm talking about, so you kind of see the development, and this development actually stood out to me quite a lot, actually. So these allow the audiences to see what is going on from different perspectives at one time. This was something that really was not really used before this point, and allowed audiences to realise that they could see what was happening in a scene from different angles and people's views at one time, which I felt really aided this trailer, and it was something new for me to see and for other audiences to see, really. So yeah, I feel like this worked quite well. This shows that thriller films are coming along with new and improved editing techniques. Taken uses the most famous line in the film as a non-diegetic voiceover for the different clips from the film. This creates an intense atmosphere, even more so than the deep, intimidating voiceover from Silence of the Lambs and Jaws, as its protagonist is saying the line, as well as him demonstrating the skills he has to defeat the antagonist which he is talking about. This is a great way to get your audiences to like your protagonist by showing them what he's capable of and the type of person he is, and is something not seen much in thriller films before this point. And the thing that I like so much about this one is the fact that the voiceover is actually a line in the film. This could actually be more beneficial to me than the others, because you can easily explain the story, explain what the character's about, and at the same time build your character development in the trailer and get your audiences attached to that character all in one, which, as I'm not making the final film, I feel is a really good thing for me to try and incorporate and look into. So I'm actually going to... I feel like this was a great thing for thriller films to do, and I feel like this was a great step in the way that it kind of kept from the old thriller films that kind of dark voiceover, but made a twist on it, having its protagonist saying it, rather than just some random guy with a deep, intimidating voice. So this allows your audience to see what your protagonist is all about and what he does. The trailer does a better job of fleshing out its characters to the audience from the previous decades, which is good in my opinion. However, it does not flesh out its storyline as well as First Blood or King Kong in previous years, which could be seen as a drawback, but it depends on what you expect to see in a trailer. And personally, yes, I see this as a drawback for Taken, but it's hard to incorporate everything when it's done a lot of other things right, where First Blood and King Kong fell short. So it is hard to compare, but yes, I would say Taken is a huge development from these two films. So overall, Taken is a good trailer which portrays to its audience what its main protagonist is all about, while showing them that some action scenes and new editing techniques to get the audience excited for the film and looking to see giving the audience something new to see when it comes to the thriller film trailer franchise, and making them excited to see the film Taken. So moving on to more recent years, we're going into kind of the 2010 side of the decades now. I have got another 2016 one that I do want to talk about, but I'm going to be talking about Gone Girl. So heading into the more recent thriller films, Gone Girl takes a hint from the 1990s Silence of the Lambs, trying a drama kind of crime type thriller. But with less gore and more focus on the story and characters, making the audience think about who's in the right and who's the guilty person in the wrong in this film. So with the disappearance of his wife, Nick Dunn has become the focus of an intense media circus. Nick sees the spotlight turn on him when it's suspected that he may not be innocent and could be the man that killed his wife. So much like Taken, Gone Girl focuses on a crime thriller and focuses on a detective type of protagonist trying to locate a family member. However, unlike Taken, it is more of a drama than an action film, and focuses more on its character development in the trailer than past decades. And so the audience can kind of connect with the character, even through the trailer, which some thriller films do not do. Gone Girl actually uses some intense music and shows a lot of the protagonist in different situations to really build this intense atmosphere for the film. This is something which has not changed in the thriller films, as all the thriller films since 1930s all try to build this intense atmosphere in some way or another and give the audience suspense, which at the end of the day I think what a thriller film trailer is all about. But what Gone Girl seems to do that's different from these past trailers is that it shows the protagonist as kind of a protagonist and antagonist. Now, this all depends on the storyline more than a thriller film trailer. But the fact that it balances it out, him being a protagonist and him being a suspect as an antagonist, it keeps the audience engaged. And once again, much like Silence of the Lambs, it keeps the audience asking these questions about the protagonist and what he's all about. So I feel that by allowing the audience to ask all these questions kind of connects them to the film. And as it's become a common occurrence, I feel like it's a thing that most thriller films are doing nowadays. Because if you don't allow the audience to ask these questions, they're not really going to be intrigued in the film or feel any need to see it, especially if you show them all the best clips straight off the bat, which you need to be careful of, which I think Psycho fell short on, even though it was a great film. Gone Girl is a film you have to follow intently to understand, unlike Kong or Taken, when yes, they do have stories, but you don't have to watch them intensely to enjoy or understand what's going on, whereas Gone Girl, you have to watch the trailer, you realise that it's going to be one of those films that you have to really listen to. So I feel that Gone Girl kind of takes this more adult approach to thriller films. And yes, Taken was a bit violent, and all the films I've talked about have been kind of upper ages, but I feel like this is aimed at a different target audience to normal thriller film goers, because it doesn't really focus on the action, thrilling, intense side of a thriller film, more focusing on the story and the characters, which there's nothing wrong with. It just kind of takes more aspects from drama genres rather than action or horror-based genres. So overall, I think Gone Girl shows how far thriller films have actually come, and it shows a greater understanding of its characters in the trailer. And in some ways, the overall experience with better sound quality and video quality really makes the experience better. So even though it's something very obvious, from the blind eye, you can tell that thriller films keep developing by the fact that the sound quality has improved and the picture quality has improved as well. So yes, this is very generic, and it'd be for any thriller film, but it really does show that they've come along with their editing and their storylines, and the fact that their films nowadays are tending to flesh out their characters a little bit more, I personally really like, because it allows you to connect with the character before you even go and see the film, meaning you have a little bit more understanding of the character when you go into that film. And now I'll move on to the 2016. So finally, I move on to the last section of this video, and talk about the 2016 release, The Shallows. And the reason I kind of wanted to do this is because I wanted to go to the present year and just to kind of follow up on from the 1930s to the present day. Yes, you could say 2010s, but I just wanted to kind of end it on this year. And another reason I wanted to choose the film The Shallows is because I wanted to compare the similarities to 1970s Jaws, because I feel like because these two films are about sharks and they're very similar in the way that, because they're sharks and because it's both based around the same kind of storyline, I feel like this will be a great way to kind of show how thriller films have moved along throughout the years, rather than try and compare them to kind of different takes on thriller films. So this does focus more on a gory horror film like Jaws, but has some drama in there too, where Nancy, the main character, has to think about how she can get off this rock she is stuck on, and mourning over the fact that she may not ever see her family again, you have to realise. So, a mere 200 yards from shore, surfer Nancy is attacked by a great white shark, with her short journey to safety becoming the ultimate contest of wills. The Shallow, much like Jaws, is a shark thriller film, and in my opinion, it is the best thriller film since Jaws, but unfortunately is not quite as good. It is very similar to Jaws in some ways, in the way of the camera shots, as it uses one based slightly underwater, And then they're not exactly the same as Jaws. It kind of still has that underwater feel, and because it's the type of storyline they are, but the fact that they're still using the same kind of camera work shows that it hasn't improved. Well, I say improved, the quality's improved, but the same kind of camera shots are used because they're effective. They were effective in 1970. Why change something that hasn't, it's not broken? It's something that really intrigued audiences back in that day, and even today, where we see shark films a lot more, you don't always see that camera shot, and there's nothing wrong with changing something that was not broken in the first place. It also has very intense music aided what is happening in the trailer, which makes it even more chilling, and it really works well, though it's not quite as iconic as the Jaws theme, which in some ways doesn't really help it as much, but the fact that the intense music's still there and still aids what's going on the screen still shows that these trailers are so similar in the way that they're trying to intrigue their audience to come and see the film, in the way by kind of creating a suspenseful, intense atmosphere, and what I was saying earlier, trying to scare them into the film is something that I feel that both these films, and actually, in fact, most of these thriller films on this video have tried to do. Though The Shallows is not the best film ever created by a long shot, or even the best thriller film, the way it presents itself in the trailer is pretty much spot on in my opinion. From the intense music to showing off what the storyline and the characters is all about, it really does do a good job on getting it hyped on the film. However, from the trailer, it did show its storyline and characters pretty well. But what we didn't know, we don't really know that much about the story. We don't know how he got there, and yes, it's not always a bad thing. But the fact that we just see her on this rock in the trailer I analysed, you don't know much beforehand, you don't know much afterhand. Yes, that's why you want to go and see the film, but it would have been nice to have some kind of recognition of her out the rock. Just to kind of, and yes, they did bring us in the later trailers, but for the film, the trailer I'm looking at, they didn't do that. So that could have been a way to improve, and just to see a little bit of what the character is like. Because we see this girl in a dangerous situation, we don't really have any attachment to her because we don't know anything about her. So it kind of takes away from that kind of intense suspense of the thriller film. But it's not always, the fact that the trailer, you can't really blame it for it because of this, so we don't know much about the storyline. Yes, they could have developed the characters, but it does make the film, you want to go and see the film. So overall, The Shallows is one of the best trailers I think I've seen all year. And though all the trailers and films are great in their own right on this list, The Shallows did a really good job for me of building suspense and making me want to go and see this film. It's the fact that it incorporates all the conventions well. They could have done a little bit more on characters to make it just that little bit more perfect, but I'm just nitpicking here. Yes, I would have liked to see more character development, maybe a little bit more on the story, but other than that, the music, the setting, the location, the camera work, all of it really came together to make one really intense thriller film trailer, which I think shows a staple of how far thriller films have come from 1930s to 2016. The contrast between those two, you can really see how far thriller films and films in general have come from the early days of filmmaking. So overall, I just want to wrap this video up. All these trailers are great in their own way, and yes, they have improved through the years, visually and by sound. But none are perfect. None are actually perfect. Though from all the new aspects and ideas coming into thriller films, they all definitely do a good job of improving through the years, and all do a great job of building suspense like a good thriller film should, making the audience want to come and watch the film. So even though these films are completely different to each other, and the filmmaking and the visual looks of the film are getting better, these films are not in rank order of which one's best to worst. These films are some are better than others by a long shot. But the fact that the trailers are improving, which is what I'm doing, shows that the more intense suspense, conventions fleshed out in the trailer, you really do develop a great trailer for people to want to come and see that film. And the trailers especially have developed very well from 1930s all the way up to the present year of 2016.